All right. Welcome everyone to today's edition of Contributor Experience. On today's call, we will discuss automation, workflow, and people, this is our regular meeting. I'm going to go ahead and put the notes in the agenda. We have a very light schedule today. So feel free to also pop some items on the agenda, or we can obviously have free conversation or let us out early. And for those that are on the call, if you don't mind putting your name in the attendee information, that would be awesome, just so we can keep track of that as well, so we know where conversations are starting and stopping. The first thing we always do at our meetings is handle reoccurring items that are listed at the top of the agenda. So first things first, do we have any either new contributors on the call or new people to Contributor Experience that would like to do a brief introduction of themselves?
Hi, I'm Chris Hodge.
Hi, Chris.
I'm SIG lead for SIG OpenStack, and I've been kind of lurking around in the Contribex group for a bit, but this is the first meeting I've been to. So, hi, everybody.
Well, welcome. We love to have you and your awesome fresh perspective. So thanks for joining us. And then Rob, I have not seen you in a meeting before. Would you like to introduce yourself? And it's totally fine if you say no.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's okay. This is my first meeting. I think I've just maybe started one of the groups, and then you might invite me based on that. So I'm just a CI/CD automation engineer in Dublin.
Very cool. Welcome. And then let's see. We do have hosts, I believe, this week for the community meeting. For those that don't know, we have a weekly Kubernetes community meeting that happens every Thursday at 10 a.m. In this group, we just make sure that everything for that meeting is running smoothly and on schedule. Let's see, just want to make sure that we have A, a host this week, and B, that they have everything that they need to be successful. So I'm going to the SIG update schedule doc.
I'm the host, Paris.
Okay, cool. And you're good?
I should be, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And then SIG Network's giving me a hard time, but yeah, I mean, they're supposedly going to be there tomorrow.
Okay, all right. Well, reach out if you need anything at all, and I can help you, okay?
Okay, thanks.
And then we typically do a graph of the week. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And for those that don't know what graph of the week is, it's DevStats. And DevStats is a product of the CNCF, and that's a list of several dashboards that we use to collect metrics on the health, velocity, and many other items of the project. Josh, I remember you wanted to do one. Are you up this week?
No, we still have not released 110, which means we still have burn down meetings.
Okay, cool. All right, so we will go ahead and skip the graph this week. If I can think of a graph to show, then I'll just jump in, but we'll go ahead and skip. So Chris, short, just make a mental note that when you get into the doc on Thursday, that if there's nothing in there, then we'll just take it out, okay? All right, and then next item of business is outreach for Meet Our Contributors and office hours. George is actually on the West Coast this week, so he couldn't be with us for this meeting, but he did kick off office hours this morning and heard that was very successful. Meet Our Contributors is another version of that, except it's contributor-based questions, where office hours is user-based questions. We're always looking for new folks for that. So if anybody on the line wants to help either as someone answering questions or as someone that's just helping doing outreach to get more folks on either of those calls to help with questions, that would be much appreciated. And that's it for our reoccurring items. So I have the first item on the agenda is, are there any open automation or workflow issues that we need to discuss on today's call that are immediate? It looks like Christoph, you actually put one for bot configuration change for K community. Do you want to talk about that and explain it a little bit in case people haven't read the mailing list yet?
Yeah, so I put in a PR and put a mail out to the mailing list proposing 2 changes for the community repo. One was to change the way approve works. There's an existing setting with the approve plugin where we can make it instead of, so when you open a PR, by default right now, if you're the author and you have, it will say that the author implicitly approves the PR. So if the author has approve rights over the directory that they are putting the files in, they have approve rights over every directory, or they're a top level approver, it will automatically approve the PR, meaning the only extra step that you would need is an LGTM. The proposed change there was to turn that implicit approval off, which means if you're a PR author, you would need to explicitly go /approve to say that you approve your own PR. You can still do that if you have the rights to do that. So there isn't a block saying like an author can't approve their own PR, but you need to explicitly say /approve to approve your own PR. As opposed to right now, if you want to not approve your PR and you want to delegate approval to somebody else, you have to use the anti-pattern approve cancel. That was one proposed change. The other proposed change was changing the merge method in community from the default, which is the bot will click the merge button, like the equivalent of the GitHub merge button, which creates a merge commit, which retains the full commit history in the PR. The difference here would be it will squash all the commits in the PR into one, and the bot will generate that commit at the head of the repository. There has been quite a bit of discussion on it on the mailing list, which I love, that there's kind of a back and forth and making sure that we're getting this change right. I'm wondering if anybody here has any further comments that I may not have voiced on the email list, or any concerns. I'm probably going to send an email based on this meeting and what the things that are on the email list, and try to get some consensus about how we move forward, because there are some points on either side that people have raised, and figure out, okay, can we move forward? Should we not move forward? That kind of stuff. So if there's any comments here, that'd be great.
I have comments, but I'm going to wait for everyone else who wants to comment. Does anyone else have any comments? Tim, please throw in your thoughts in this discussion, even if it's just me too, on any of the points. Helps for consensus for me. Yes, even if you're a +1 or a -1, please just say so. That would be great as well. So I'm +1 on both, Christoph. I think you know that already. I'm also team Garrett as well, where I think we shouldn't necessarily do this for just K community. It should be done for everyone, but at the same time, we should test it with K community. You know, I'm a fan of the squash because most of my stuff needs to be squashed. I am that bad person, everyone, that Christoph was talking about in the bot squash. So yes, I'm a fan of that. I'm also a fan of explicitly approving explicitly approving your PR, because right now, currently, I do have the rights in K community to just be a PR author who naturally gets approved, but I'm really looking for consensus on a lot of the things that I'm putting in, and also feedback. So when it comes up as approved, I think I've gone to Christoph so many times, like, oh my gosh, make it stop. Like, how do I do this? And, you know, eventually get to the approve cancel piece. I just feel like more times than not, most people want a second glance and a second review, and that's the practice that we should be preaching. And I think Tim Pepper actually brought that point up on the mailing list as well, as it's good practice, and not just practice, but it's good practice, period. And it looks like Chris Short +1 as well. I mean, the thing is, I think most of the people in contributor experience are going to +1 you, Christoph. It's, I think, everybody else that we need to listen to. But at the same time, if we're testing this only in K community, then maybe we should just go ahead with it, because I don't think we've heard any objections from the K community crowd, except for the fact that G-Rod said maybe we should go live with this in all repos unless this is a test.
Yeah, on the approve piece, I kind of want a canary job, because everybody currently, I would say most experienced contributors to the project understand how approve works, and most people expect that if they have approve rights, that it will implicitly approve them as a PR author. This would be more kind of an experiment to see, like, is the opposite, can we train people on the opposite workflow, and is that opposite workflow better? At least with K community, it's a kind of a smaller subset. We aren't disrupting like the Kubernetes core repo, which would be the one where we'd have like the most adjustment period, because that one's had the approval plugin for the longest. On the squash bit, the thing that I'm kind of leaning towards, Ryan Hitchman from SIG testing had mentioned yesterday that maybe there's a way to say on like a per PR basis whether it needs a squash, because then if there is like an intent inside the PR's commit history, we can retain that most of the time. But if it's the big situations would be like new committers or committers that are using things like the GitHub UI, where it's more difficult to pull down and then squash your commits manually, because GitHub doesn't offer that as the PR author, an option of just going squash. There might be a way to kind of expand the bot command set to say on an individual PR basis, hey, this PR I want to squash, but the majority of them retain the PR's commit history.
Jeff, you wanted to say something. I think you came online.
Oh yeah. Well, so I was just, well, first of all, I'll agree that I think the what you were just saying, Christoph, was a great suggestion of like having selectability, because yeah, definitely I've encountered situations where you know, certain times, like, you know, a PR is good, but I want it to be squashed, and I don't necessarily want to wait some number of cycles, or maybe, you know, it's a new contributor, they might just vanish, which is problematic. I was going to say, with respect to the approval stuff, I think one reason possibly you're getting some pushback to this also is that, at least inside Google, which is kind of where some of the owners' stuff is based on, we use basically, I think implicit self-approval is the norm there. So sort of having a different workflow, for at least for Google developers, might be one point that's a little different. That's not necessarily a reason not to do it, but that's at least possibly one source of some of the disagreement, is just because it's different than the way it works inside Google. So that's kind of what we're used to. The other thing is, I think one of the motivations, I think, as Paris was saying, is that, you know, we want to have a way to sort of indicate that more people should look at something and review something. But I'm not sure, like, I think that's still one thing that's not entirely clear, is like, it's not clear if I remove approval from my own self-approval, like, how am I supposed to indicate that, like, I want more people to look at, or like, you know, how do we indicate that I want to have a consensus around this? Is it just read it in comment, or is there something in the infrastructure that kind of indicates that, you know, we're doing this because I want to make sure that, you know, some number of people actually approve this, review it, LG it before it actually gets merged. I don't know if this is something, I guess, that GitHub's not great at. I don't know if we have an answer, or if this is still just kind of an experiment.
I think right now the best practice is just that you have to kind of call it out textually, and maybe at individuals or at groups, teams, sub-teams.
Yeah, I mean, I really strongly disagree with the idea of self-approval anyway. Like, the entire purpose of code review is that you make mistakes and you're blind to your own mistakes, and you know, other leaders in the, you know, for that repository should review that and make sure it's correct. I mean, I don't have a lot of contributions, but I've had contributions merge that, I haven't wanted to go in because of, kind of a lax review process.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, when this came up in community meeting before, some of the people who were asking for a change, specifically what they wanted changed was the implicit self-approval, because they said, hey, I put something up here as a trial balloon, saying, hey, what if we did things this way? And, and because I'm an owner, it was automatically approved. And as long as we have self-approval, it makes it very awkward to actually use PRs in that way as a way of proposing an alternative approach for something.
And like there's a number of different patterns we could possibly use here. I know, like in the test info repo, a very common pattern is using the hold command. Like if the reviewer wants to say, like, this looks good to me, but allow the owner to, the PR author to have more say on it, they'll put a hold on it so it won't automatically merge. That's one pattern. There's also just withholding LGTM. Right now, anybody who's an org member can LGTM any PR in any repo across the org. Which that was also a discussion point that came up, is like, is that what we want? Like, do we have a problem with drive-by LGTMs from people who may not necessarily know or understand whether they have the experience to properly code review something? Because the LGTM is supposed to be, that's the in-depth code review. Like, that was the original intent, is LGTM is supposed to be the in-depth code review, whereas approve, the intent, as I understand it, is this is the code owners for the files that own this code have said the overall idea and design are okay, but the approvers don't necessarily do the in-depth code review. But again, with the different ways of handling it, I think at the very least, switching off the implicit self-approval and moving to an explicit approval, whether it's a self-approval or not. I think at least we can understand intent there. If a PR author says, hey, /approve, I am confident enough in this code that I am going to self-approve it as a code owner, there's still going to be a review process, because you can't self-LGTM. That's one of the only restrictions on LGTM, is that you can't do it yourself. So you'll get code review from at least some person, but as a code owner saying, like, I am confident enough in this change that I'm going to approve this change into the code that I own.
So, I mean, let's wait. What was the time box did you give a time box on your initial lazy consensus email?
I think I just put the default 72.
Okay, that's fine. I was going to say, in our charter it says 72 anyway, so we can always ride that as the default. But yeah, I would wait, I guess, 72 more hours, and if you don't hear any more dissent from contributor experience folks, then I'd say let's test it out for 30 days with contributors, with the K community repo. And then we can reevaluate and assess and then discuss how we can potentially move this and migrate this to other repos. That's my 2 cents. I think we should proceed based off of limited objections from the K community crowd. Anyone have any objections with that?
I'm wondering if, because the existing behaviors are somewhat unclear, if it would make sense to actually propose something a little more radical, like instead of LGTM and approve, if we made different commands, or reviewed okay, reviewed need changes, and then approved for merge, that are, I think that's what the behaviors we're driving for are, but they're kind of split between the current LGTM and approve.
Did you mention that on the mailing list item, Tim? I think you may
Yeah, I
have.
did. I don't think
Okay.
I'd seen any responses there yet, but I thought I'd bring it up here since we have people for kind of live discussion.
Yeah, I like that idea. Anyone else have any discussion points on that?
It's obviously a bigger change.
Surprised you don't.
I think it is. I think it is a bit of a bigger change. Like I'm not tied to what we have today because it's what we have today. I know that doing something like that would be a much bigger workflow change for a lot of developers, and it would definitely have like a larger day-to-day impact with new commands and new workflow from the get-go. Maybe like what I'd be open to is maybe if we run this, like the implicit approve experiment, if we run this for 30 days in community and see how it works, how, do people get that they need to, if they are a PR author and they do want to self-approve, that they need to add the command in. See how people take to that. If we get a ton of pushback to changing the workflow, once the workflow is actually in place, then I'd be more cautious about more radical changes to the workflow. But if that works, then maybe I'd be open to talking about, okay, what if we were to remove the concepts of what we have today, say for a second that doesn't matter what we have today. What would the ideal workflow be as far as reviewing, approving, and merging PRs? Maybe a more radical workflow would end up working better, and maybe we can advertise that around, like, hey, would this workflow work better for you? And kind of advertise that around the community and see if we get some community response, and see how much of that community response is like, I like the current system because it's the current system, or I like the current system because I have some specific points that why the current system works really, really well.
Makes sense, and I think the trial and the community repo is a good place to kind of see what feedback we get, because so many people do contribute to that repo. I mean, basically every SIG, right?
Yep. I mean, at least in the design area.
Just real quick question. Are people here familiar with the Garrett review process with -2, -1, 0, +1, +2?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very familiar with that.
Sounds
I
like
actually like it a lot because the meanings of those things are all very clear. It's clear who the people who can merge are because of the +2 -2, and it also separates that that process from the actual saying that you want a patch to merge. And so you could have several owners all give +2s, but if it's people don't want it to merge for some reason, it doesn't actually merge until or the merge process doesn't start until one of the owners hits that +1 button and submits it that way. And there's no, I think that one of the issues that people seem to be bringing up in the community meeting, before, is that they don't know, approve versus looks good to me. There are very deep cultural signifiers behind those, and they vary from repository to repository, and it's not clear what's happening. Where if you just say that like workflow +1 means that the workflow process starts, that's very clear and it's unambiguous and it's consistent. So I know that this is kind of we can also talk about Vim versus Emacs as our next topic, but I know that coming from a Garrett workflow world, that I find the GitHub workflow to be jarring.
Yeah, I think everybody, we just went through the whole what does LGTM mean to you really experiment, and came up with quite a few different definitions there alone. So I mean, I'm all in favor of anything that will take the any ambiguity out of what certain words mean, including making up our own words. All right, Christoph, so let's get an action. So we'll wait that 72 hours and then go ahead for the 30-day K community test. And then we can kick it off that way. I'm trying to think of like what else we could do here to educate the population on just bot command meanings in general. I'm just trying to think more widely and broadly. Does anybody have any ideas here?
Before I run off to the burn down meeting for the release,
Yep.
I'd say that I think the work that Aaron started on capturing descriptions of the commands is
Yep.
really useful, but I feel like maybe it's bogged down a bit in that some of the remaining things are the places where there is a lot of ambiguity.
Yeah.
So it's not so much even advertising what they mean as soliciting what they're supposed to mean.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and that's we can, and what we
absolutely.
can do is we can always solicit info from like a SIG leads distro too, and then they can water it down to their populations of people, so we can try to get better targeted information as well instead of KDev.
And I think at some point we just PR the documentation as we understand it, and as people say, hey, wait, that's not quite what I thought, then we start at pointed conversations around specific commands and iterate if needed on them.
Okay, and I'll check in with Aaron too as to where he is with the progress with that and how we can help too. All right, so I just took a note to check in with Aaron. Okay, all right, if anybody's leaving for burn down or cloud provider, I wish you luck. All right, the next on the agenda, and Christoph, did you get what you need out of conversation from that? It sounds like you have a lot.
Yeah. I think I'm going to summarize just kind of what our path forward is out to the mailing list, and then me too.
Awesome. All right. Is there any other automation or workflow issues that we'd like to discuss currently? We have one more agenda item that relates to that, but anyone else have any open questions, concerns, or comments about automation or workflow? Right, the next that is similar. Last week we had a discussion. An engineer came on the line and talked about. I'm losing my train of thought already. READMEs in Git. That there should be a README for every owner's file to help with like the what is this code and why should we care, and really helps with troubleshooting users and things like that. And Christoph, I know you had some thoughts, and I believe our next steps were to talk about those thoughts and also discuss our next steps. And I think one of them was go to SIG architecture with this information, since this is more of a cultural change because it affects a wide net of people. But at the same time, I think we did get some very explicit information from Thomas because that's what we asked, so that we could try to break the problem down a little bit more into detail. And if anybody is on the call right now that did not join last week's and has no idea what I'm talking about, there is some pretty extensive notes in the agenda that you can read. And Thomas did provide, like I said, some really good examples as to what he's talking about and what he would actually be looking for with that. So Christoph, did you have any ideas on how you wanted to, or how we should proceed with the next steps with this?
Well, I think the takeaway from last meeting is we're going to kind of look over those and then take it to SIG architecture, which I think is still the right way forward. I just unfortunately have not had time to dig through Thomas' notes from last week. Okay. So yeah, like I'm going to do that myself. If anybody else wants to dig through them as well and pull out anything that's important, I think probably I may just start a discussion on the mailing list about it, like so that we have a thread on this topic, and that we can then carry that thread over to SIG architecture. Like, hey, SIG architecture, can you like take a look at this particular thread on the list and tell us what you think? Like, is this something that is sustainable or workable for Kubernetes? Is this something that we want to potentially mandate? Not that we really like to mandate things, but is this something that would be worth the contributor effort?
What was I
I
going
think
to
that's
say?
a perfectly reasonable approach.
Yeah. Jeff, did you read what was going on from last week? Thomas is actually a Googler that came and was saying how it would be cool if the code was better documented in READMEs and owners files, because that's where technical support type engineers are looking when they're debugging issues. And they're saying, he's pretty much saying that we're releasing so much new code so fast that it's hard to keep up. And, the release notes are great and things like that, but they don't necessarily talk about like code structure and why certain things are behaving certain ways. And so Thomas's suggestion was that we should have READMEs for every owners file. And obviously we have 4,000 plus owners files. So it's like, how and where and why do we start? So, I mean, like as Christoph mentioned, we were thinking that we would take this to SIG architecture and discuss kind of like how we could improve in this area. There were several people on the last call that said, why don't we kind of mandate this? And that like M word scares me a little bit. And that's why but like, as soon as someone says the M word, I'm like, SIG architecture. Ryan's laughing too.
You can just make a bot command that nags you whenever you don't add a README along with your owner files.
Yeah, I'm okay with. I'm very okay with a lot of the suggestions, but that's why I was like, let's get architecture involved in this conversation, so that we're not like pumping out mandates from contributor experience. Yeah, no, Jeff, I would love you don't have to read it right now, but later I'd love to hear what your opinions are on that. All right.
It seems like a great idea, because I think right now, sometimes to figure out some of those things, you have to actually go look at the PRs and see if there was discussion in the PR. And so getting that discussion into a more discoverable place is a great idea.
Exactly. All right, so the only other thing that I had on the agenda today is the buddy program, and that has to do with mentoring. The buddy program, for folks that don't know, is an idea that was actually born from GopherCon, and it's very specific to their event. And so what they're ideally doing is pairing experienced GopherCon attendees up with non-experienced GopherCon attendees, because the experience, even for folks that go to KubeCon for the first time, can be pretty daunting. There's a lot of activities. People don't necessarily know like the best things that they should go to. So these kind of mentors get matched with them and like help them throughout the event and like give them advice on what they should do. But then they also have like a 1-hour breakfast where they sit and talk about life and all things go. So I was actually thinking we could take that further and do a very similar thing for Kubernetes and do one-on-one matching, but there's a but in here. It is a one-time 1-hour session. So it's very much like Meet Our Contributors, where we have a bunch of contributors on the line and it's an Ask Us Anything for an hour, but it's a very tailored 1-hour, one-person session. And you can do anything you want with that 1 hour. So you can either pair program with the person, you could do code reviews. And this is a person that you probably wouldn't be able to have that kind of 1 hour access to normally. So Chris Short and I are running that down right now. We are trying, what our intentions are is to have as least amount of human interaction in that process as possible, which is very abnormal for a lot of mentoring one-on-one matching programs, because there's usually a lot of humans in the pot doing a lot of human related spreadsheeting. And let's not do that, because we have awesome technology that will help us with automation and things like that. So we're taking a current contributor information form that we've been using to collect people's information and going to try to automate that with the matching process. Hopefully we can go live with at least a test within the next 2 to 3 weeks. That's my plan, at least for, like I said, for a test. And then we're also going to be shortlisting and voting on names for mentors, which is pretty exciting. So I'm going to send that out to the KDev list shortly. And the reason why we're voting is because I've talked to 3 different marketing professionals and also myself and many of you about what we should name Kubernetes mentors. And everyone's kind of like, we're out of Greek words. But guess what? The Greek word for mentor is mentor. That's a Greek word. So a lot of people have said, why not Kubernetes mentors? Like, but I think that's kind of bland and dry. I don't know about you, but I don't want to update my Twitter bio and say Kubernetes mentor. It's kind of like, like I said, a user mentor. Like, am I helping people learn Kubernetes? Like, it doesn't necessarily describe that you're helping contributors climb a ladder. At least from my perspective, it doesn't. So like Docker captains are evangelists. These people are not evangelists. I mean, sure, they're evangelizing maybe the contribution process in the sense that they're getting more people into it, or helping the people that are currently in it. But that doesn't necessarily, like I said, doesn't describe it. So what I'm going to do is we'll create a short list of 10 words. I'll take that to the steering committee. They'll break it down into hopefully maybe 5. And then we can like take it to a vote on Kubernetes dev mailing lists, and I'll like throw in a hoodie to a random winner kind of thing. So that's updates on mentoring stuff. It is 10:10. Does anyone have, 10:10 on the West Coast, I apologize. Does anyone have any other items or questions about mentoring or anything about contributor experience? Oh my gosh, we didn't take the whole meeting. I know, Ryan, you actually put something in the comments to Christoph. Christoph, did you see that about looping Ryan in? And just for the recording purposes, y'all, Ryan is helping us with the developer guide. Woo!
Hey.
And this will be a piece of the contribution guide pie, a much needed piece to that pie, I would say. So if anyone has any questions, concerns, comments, attack Ryan. And Ryan, do you want to give a little 3-second update or however?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll give a real quick. There's a umbrella issue. I'll make sure to post that to the meeting notes today.
Awesome.
If anyone wants to jump in or help collaborate in any capacity, definitely ping me. And we're planning on, my plan with this is to kind of extend the work that Gwen has already done as far as the basic contributor and some of the chat ops interactions, and then talk about how to actually set up a basic dev environment and maybe submit a code change and review that locally. Some of that is going to be refer to your SIG group for their experience on how to do testing, and hopefully we'll link back to more specifics that each SIG can kind of dive deeper into. So yeah, thank you. I don't want to take up too much time, but
no,
yeah.
You technically have 15 minutes, but no.
Thank you, Ryan. 15 minutes worth of thank yous.
Yeah. Well, anyway, feel free to ping me in Slack. I'll try to be available there. Also, I'll be keeping an eye on the GitHub issues, and I'll try to make some progress on that over the next couple weeks, I guess.
Yes. And I need to also make changes to the charter today. So I'm going to put that on the agenda as well. I said I was going to do it yesterday, and here we are. And those changes are nothing necessarily to the content, but it is adding our new TL, Christoph. Yeah, Christoph. It's official, y'all. Christoph has gone through the rigmarole loops, the rocket ships and everything else that we have put in place to be a TL. Garrett is also coming down to TL Hood from chair. Elsie and I will remain chairs, and then we have several new sub-project owners. I mean, technically they're not necessarily new, but new as in we are officially labeling them, advertising them, and putting them out to dry. People like George Castro. Who else do we have as sub-project owners? Myself. I think there's some other people also that I'm totally not remembering right now, but I'm laying all that out in the charter today just so that it's clear who's doing what. Right now it's just a blob of processes at this point and a few names at the top. So I'll make that better. And then I'm also finally going to check in that project's markdown file too. So for new contributors on the line, Rob, and I know Chris and folks jumped already, but that's actually a good way to figure out what the heck's going on with contributor experience and what we're working on. It's in the contributor experience file under K community, and it's going to be called just projects.md. But it's a exhaustive list of stuff that we're working on for this quarter as well as next quarter. And hopefully at some point we'll figure out a better way how to project manage ourselves. But that, for me at least, was just the easiest to write it down. But all of that stuff will also be matching SIG YAML and owner file, sub-project headers, et cetera, et cetera. All right. That is it for me, unless anyone else has anything else. All right, we've got a lot going on, y'all. This Brady Bunch team right here has a lot going on. I'm like looking down at Jeff. There's a story. Anyway, all right. Have a great day. Have a great day, y'all. Enjoy.
Thanks all. See ya.